Thanks for listening. We are Western Iowa's news and classic hit station, broadcasting from the Wild Rose Casino and Hotel Studios. You'd rather be here. We are KCIM.
It is 8:06, and again, we've got another special in-studio guest for you this morning. We talked with State Representative Brian Best yesterday. That whole interview is found on our website, 1380kcim.com, and on our mobile app as well. This morning, Nathan, we bring in State Senator Jason Schultz, a longtime representative / senator, and with all the redistricting and things like that, it's hard to keep track, isn't it, Jason?
It is. You go back and forth.
I'm going to have you pull that mic a little bit closer to you.
A little bit closer there? How's that?
There you go. We're going to turn it right there.
Okay.
Perfect.
Good deal.
So, as you get ready, this is going to be, what, your 16th or 17th?
16th session, wow. 6 years in the House, and then this will be the 10th in the Senate. There's only a few of us there who have served in both chambers, and in each chamber, the minority and the majority. Mm-hmm. A lot of lessons there. They've served me well, and you build a lot of relationships even between parties, going between chambers and between minority and majority. You learn a lot of issues that are not ideological, not really political, and they're just good governing. You learn to build relationships so that things like that can happen.
So what have you learned over those 16 years? I mean, how to be an effective lawmaker? Give us your thoughts on that.
Build relationships. And by that, what I mean is have conversations. Learn. It doesn't work for everybody. You get a lot of folks' personalities just don't mesh. But if you can find a personality who is generally like-minded for the betterment of Iowa, get to know them a little bit. Ask about their family. Where do they live? What was their upbringing? Senator Tony Bisignano is actually kind of the number one name that I would drop. That's a gentleman that I can sit and have a conversation with. Politics doesn't even come up, and you do that. And then when an issue, contentious or not, comes up, you start from a position, a common position, as opposed to an antagonistic position. It's done a lot of good. But then at that same time, you're both adults representing positions, constituencies. He's South Des Moines. I'm Western Iowa. You have to recognize that you have to hold your position, state it, and accept the other person's position, even if you don't agree with it. So.
Something Representative Best said yesterday, he'll be going into his 10th session this year, so pretty close in terms of timelines there. He said, I never thought I'd spend that long in the State House. Did you kind of have that same mindset when you first ran? I
was exactly there with the exact same number. Sometimes as the system starts. So my first 2 years in the House, I was in a Democrat trifecta, just the opposite of where we are now. Then for 4 years in the House, it was a split legislature with the Democrats had the majority in the Senate, and Mike Grunstall being the majority leader over there, Craig Paulson over in the House, and then. I ran for the Senate after a retirement of a very popular Nancy Butker, the senator from Harlan. And there I was actually in the minority in the Senate for 2 years, learned the procedures, most importantly, learned the culture, the conversations, and it was a far, far more fitting environment for me. I'm an introvert by nature. 100 representatives.
I do not buy that for a second.
No, I'm sorry, but it's true. It's true. 100 personalities was too much for me to handle, so I fell into just working with a certain number, and it was always it just wasn't the factions who were dealing with the issues I need to deal with. In the House, it's or in the Senate, you have half that number of personalities. It worked better. And in the election of 16, we gained the Republican trifecta, 17 until now. So the last 8 years have been what really have made the career all worth it, paid the price with all the different lessons, the mistakes I made, mostly in the House.
It's not always been easy, though, having that trifecta. You don't always agree, the House and the Senate. We talked about that with Brian yesterday, saying, certain bills would pass in the Senate, but they wouldn't pass in the House. I mean, it's not like it's all just, here's what we're doing, and everybody just shows up and votes.
Agreed. I'll drop another name that I hope a lot of listeners remember, a very honorable man, Senator Steve Kettering of Lakeview, taught me that when I was very first in the Senate in the minority. He's like, now be careful what you wish for. He said the arguments can be a little more difficult yet when you're dealing with friends and differences. So
starting to jump into some issues. One that stands out, I think, as will likely be one of the key issues been talked about is state income tax. So a couple years back, the bill got signed to basically cut the income tax progressively to 3.9% starting in 2026. But now the goalposts have moved a little bit, at least from the governor's perspective, and I believe from the Senate's perspective as well, as elimination of the state income tax. How do you see that legislation potentially finding a solution? Because I don't believe the House is quite as on board as the Senate might be.
We're going to have a very detailed math discussion. So we're looking at some different goals. The major tax bills were 2018, 2022. There were a couple. There was an instance of accelerating the graduated income tax cuts. And that happened. And that happened because just exactly as I expected to happen in 18 when we actually did this, when you cut revenues, when you cut taxes, you actually increase revenues because the money you leave in the economy spurs economic growth. You get more activity, you get more revenue. Well, our point was to leave more money in people's pockets. It was not to stack cash at the state level. So we didn't. So we accelerated the tax cuts to make sure that money would stay in people's pockets. It happened again. Revenue kept coming up. But we are reaching a point where there's a sense that we went into this with a plan. And there are, I want to be very careful about this. There are no warning bells and there's no alarms going off. It's just the opposite. What we're seeing is the icing is off the cake, and now we're getting down to the actual. Let's take a look. If we're going to get down to the long-term goal of 0% income tax, which I'm a full fan of, time value of money means that the quicker you accelerate those cuts up front, the longer that goal takes to arrive. So the concerns that I've heard about not being able to meet our obligations, not being able to take care of it, they've been proven that didn't happen. But what we are seeing in our very long range is that 6-8 years out, just as tax cuts are going to do, we're thinning that margin. So we're going to have a math discussion on how fast do we want to accelerate tax cuts, which are always a good thing for the economy, versus reaching that final goal of 0. If we act too fast up front, we may push that end goal out to the point where it may not be achieved.
What about states like Kansas? They tried this too, right? And didn't it fail miserably there?
Yes, it did. So we did almost the opposite of what they did. We controlled spending before we cut taxes. And that was and they didn't control spending ever. So they also ran into a bottoming of the oil markets. They are actually somewhat of they have some oil income. There were a couple things that all happened at the same time, and they didn't control spending. We actually are spending 88% in the last budget, 88% of our ongoing revenue. We are in the driver's seat there. So Kansas was the example that we used to show us how not to do it. We didn't copy them whatsoever. And actually, we're starting to get people. I've heard references. The governor's office, and I think even our staff member has actually received calls from other states saying, "Hey, what was the magic? Why is it working in Iowa?" Well, it comes down to 5, 6, 7 year projections. Our revenue estimating conference does a 3-year projection. We doubled that. We use a conservative revenue growth, and then the average growth is 4%. Just going back historically, we use a 3.5% growth model. Everything we do leaves a margin, and it's working.
So on another tax issue, this one looking at property tax, this was action taken last session to try and limit budget growth for cities and counties. And there's been a lot of pushback. At least even frustration, I think would be a fair term from city councilors and supervisors saying like, hey, you're hamstringing us when we're doing what you want, which is growing in terms of their tax base. Is there any consideration at the State House to potentially look at changing how that process works at all?
No. There will be a correction bill. I understand, once the system goes into place, you find a couple places that you need to tweak. But no, going backwards, we won't. And you use the key word. It's a reduction in growth. There are no cuts. And a lot of times we think that some of the people who are upset with us don't don't understand the bill. I'm not completely satisfied with the efforts of their state association to educate them, to let them know how this is going to work. What we generally did was we collapsed several categories of separate levies into one, so it's easier for the taxpayer to see, where their money's going and if there's an increase or not. But we also left, and then we put a cap on growth on like general fund, but then we turned around and some of those that I'm hearing complaints about, like pension or health insurance premiums, those are still uncapped. So a lot of what we're hearing indicates that we didn't do a very good job of getting the details out to them, and their association didn't get details out. There's also provisions for I think 5 years where they could actually move money legally, and it was prohibited before because we had silos. But they can move money here or there if they need some to adjust while they adjust to the new formula. But the runs we did don't show anywhere near the damage that we're hearing from individual supervisors or city council members.
And we've got a lot of things to get to, so we're going to try and go quick through these topics. One, that we're, according to Representative Best yesterday, a bit of a holding pattern when it comes to pipelines, just because the Iowa Utilities Board waiting on other states to kind of make a ruling. Yeah. And he basically saying it's a moot point because if it doesn't go through South Dakota, it's irrelevant what Iowa does because the project's not going to happen. But that one, in Carroll County, we've talked off air saying like it hasn't been an issue in Carroll County, but you go down to Harlan for your legislative forums there, and it's the only issue that people care about.
Yes.
So do you think there will be actual action even if something in one of those other states doesn't happen?
Legislatively, no, I'm not expecting any. I've been involved in a bill 2 different sessions to try to do something. I should say in full transparency, my father's Century Farm is actually on that list. He's not going to sign an easement. If this doesn't go well, one of my closest constituents is going to be very mad, and I don't blame him. So this is a personal issue for me too. There is no reason that eminent domain should be used for a commercial project. That part drives me up the wall. But I was Commerce Chair and tried to bring a bill out of committee. The next year, I was actually on the subcommittee, and we tried to get it out of subcommittee, and we couldn't get it done. The Senate side has been working on it, and we keep running into there's just not quite enough support for multiple reasons. But I do wish the IUB would just say no. This is not a legitimate use of eminent domain.
Yeah, for a commercial business to come in and try and use that. Let's talk about the savings accounts for private schools and things like that. Are you happy with the way that's going right now and the way it's going to progress? And what do you say to the public schools?
Yes, I am happy. The rollout done by the executive branch, the governor's team did a wonderful job setting up a vendor and doing the rollout itself. That would have made it much harder for the program to be successful. But we got through that hurdle. The demand is larger than we expected. That's pretty well known. I'm happy with it. I think it's going well. So to the public schools, certainly I'm first of all out here in Western Iowa we have much less opportunity for choices. Carroll being the obvious outlier in that. We have Kemper and we have Carroll Public. The bill gives Carroll Public about $1 million additional property tax dollars because the whole thing was about consistency. That if the state is going to take on the responsibility of funding and education, we're going to include all children and not those who choose out of the public. But the flip side of that is if that child is going to be in the school district, even if they go to a parochial or a private, they count for for property tax purposes. For Carroll Public, that ends up being about $1 million new money each year. So I think it treated everybody pretty fair. Now, it is not fun for somebody who has no competition to suddenly face competition. So I fully expected the pushback. I'm hoping that it leads legislatively to something I had been trying to do long before ESAs ever happened, which is to remove state mandates to the extent that we can to make it less expensive to educate a child and to give them more time in educational programming as opposed to paperwork, reports, and just mandated extra stuff.
Can you be more specific what you mean by state mandates? Like some examples of what you're referring to there.
Reporting, just paperwork that you have to turn into the State Department of Education, just constant numbers, bean counting, number crunching, additional. I'm even interested in the in-service portion. I don't know if that's. It should be up to the school. I'm certainly not against it, but it should be up to the school, and it shouldn't be part of a state program. Saying that we need to do this, we're going to. So I'd like to see if we could remove some, just make them teachers again and not paperwork.
Staying on that education front, a lot of concern about the AEA and the future of the AEA going forward. Heading into that, Governor Reynolds indicated that the state is interested in taking a look and reviewing the agency at large. Hasn't been any overt saying like, hey, we're going to cut funding or we're going to remove the agency. None of that. But what are you guys looking at doing in regards to the AEA in this upcoming session? Well,
it starts with performance, and I've always considered the core purpose of AEAs in our modern system to be a special ed assistance and specialized personnel for our schools to access, so they don't have to have them on hand. And the performance hasn't been keeping up with other states. I don't have an accusation or a charge to do that. That's what the numbers are telling us. So we are taking a look at the efficiency of tax dollars going there. Why are we not keeping up with other states when it comes to they're measuring the gap between students who are not receiving special ed and the students receiving special ed. Are the folks in the programs keeping up with the general population? Now, if they weren't being in a program means that there is a challenge there. So you're going to see some type of gap there. However, it should be as small as possible, and in a perfect world, you even that out. But the gap is getting larger in Iowa, and other states have succeeded in closing it. We're going to look at best case practices. I'm going to predict here just days before session starts, that the bottom half, the bottom 2/3 of AEA employees are going to see either no change or more resources coming to them. The top half or top 1/3 are going to see some efficiencies imposed. We believe there's some
efficiencies, meaning
maybe there's too many middle managers, maybe there's too many levels of bureaucracy, maybe there's maybe there's some kingdoms being built. This is a case where we've never really taken a look at the system, and if you take a generation of people who are their own decision makers, there's no oversight. And money just keeps coming in. So we put in $244 million last year. They get another $250 million from the federal government. Their state aid actually goes up with K-12 state supplemental aid. So they have an increasing budget with almost no oversight. We're going to provide some oversight. There's no target. There's no. I don't know of a predetermined end.
Oversight kind of meaning more regulation.
Or budget, or something's going to happen to the top third because we're worried they're not doing their job. They're the ones responsible for the outcome, the performance. More regulation, that might be too broad, but we might tell them a little bit how to structure the flow chart.
And so this is something that is now going to become, I'm just getting some breaking news on that's come through, that there have been reports of a school shooting in Perry, which is now likely going to become a major issue. I have no significant details on this at all. This is kind of happening now, but this is going to be a conversation that's going to come up in the legislature now, without a doubt. So moving forward, just kind of a baseline reaction to that news.
What an absolute tragedy. No child should have to go through this.
Absolutely. That's just, we're just, apparently, Nathan, you just got that on your phone.
Right?
As we were talking, so I will fully admit I was not really listening to what you said there at all.
That's okay. And what parent? What a nightmare.
Yeah.
But school safety is a concern. It's been talked about for a long time. Since I was a child, they've talked school safety. What can the state do on that edge? Just initial reaction to that.
Well, last year we tried to provide, and this, we were talking earlier about a potential hot topic to come up during session. We may have just, moments ago on live air, we may have just found it.
So what is your inclination after hearing that? What would you think would be reasonable for the state to do?
Well, last year we tried to support the two school districts who were seeking to allow school employees to be armed. We ran into an insurance problem. I want to see us work our way through that. The indisputable fact is the easiest way to keep violence down in school is to have the easiest way to keep numbers of loss down in a school is to have somebody there who can react within seconds. Waiting minutes, tens, dozens, half hour for a reaction to come in and stop it is unacceptable. We've seen that in multiple cases where the violence continues until somebody, I'm going to use the air quotes, official, comes in to take control. The indisputable fact is if somebody is there to stop it on hand, that is going to be better than waiting for somebody who's not on premises.
Is local law enforcement on board with that? I mean, are any kind of law enforcement agency on board with that plan?
Some are. Nobody's going to take an official position on it, but some are that I've talked to. But that's all private, personal. I mean, so individual by individual.
And I mean, this is breaking news. It's we're kind of putting you in a bad spot to even talk about it. So we'll once we get done here.
This is a belief of mine. I'm okay talking about it without preparation.
It's just tragic to hear. Not the way we typically want to do our news reporting.
Absolutely not.
It seems almost crass to talk about anything else. But one thing that I did want to touch on before we had a chance to was pharmacy benefit managers and how that has gone. A couple sessions back, you guys got kind of a study bill put through to get numbers and get some figures. Took a little bit of action last year, but it sounds like this might be the year that something significant comes along.
There is a chance of that. This is my chance to give my friend Brian Best, the retiring representative, give him the shout out. He's been a leader on this since years before it even became a public issue. He was ahead of the ball on this. 2 years ago, we could only get a data collection bill through due to the high amount of controversy and lobbying. If we did something wrong, there was a concern that we would raise people's premiums, health insurance premiums. So we did a data collection bill. We didn't do anything last session because the data had not been collected. And there was some people chomping at the bit to do it anyway, but we collected the data. Now we're 2 years, 2 sessions extra. I hope we do something serious about this. I just believe we are onto something. It'd be irresponsible for me to just start talking conjecture about what I think it is, but there is something in the system that is allowing enormous profits through every sector of our healthcare system, and at the very same time increasing health insurance premiums faster than inflation, even in these high inflation times. There's something going on.
Another big topic coming up in elections, I'm sure, is going to be the heartbeat bill. They're waiting on the state's Supreme Court to kind of rule on that, but say they come down and they strike that law down. Are you guys prepared to pass something that would pass according to the state senator, and what kind of restrictions would you place on that?
The energy is to do something similar to what we've done. We are fighting now about that one category. I believe the energy is there to do that again.
In other words, propose that basically it's 6 weeks.
Yes. I mean, now it'd be irresponsible for me to predict until they come out and say what's wrong with it. But yes, at that level, we are. I think we still have the energy to do it.
Are you in favor of exceptions for that?
I'm not myself, but if we have if that's what the legislature comes to, I'm going to support a bill that protects life.
All right. State Senator Jason Schultz once again joining us here this morning. Any priorities that we didn't hit on that you think are going to be big or you want to push?
Well, it's not so in the universal sense. We have the boards and commissions out there. We're going to go from 245 boards and commissions. Governor's bill is going to take that down to 140, 135, somewhere in there. I've got that number here, but I don't worry about the actual numbers now because it may change going through legislation. That's going to be a big headline going through early in the session. And then myself, I am, as a state government chair, I am always working on ways to build confidence and the sense of integrity in our election system. The focus right now this year for myself is to look at the voter registration lists and just make sure they're as clean and accurate as possible. And I worked for 6 years to get the same technology in our welfare applications to make just asset checks and residents. We'd like to use that technology for our registration list to make sure that everybody who is on the list lives here, is alive, just meets the basic. So we just want to make that as clean and transparent as possible.
Has there been problems with that in the past?
Yes, we have citizen grassroots groups that go through. They use the national change of address databases. Obituaries, people who pass, and they are finding people who just haven't been removed yet. There's no accusations of fraud or people using those.
Okay.
But the system, the people expect the registration lists is continually maintained and as accurate as we can make it. I think this will be a good move to do that.
It's more along the lines of avoiding the near occasion of saying, right, don't give the opportunity for fraud, even if it hasn't been used, correct?
Yes, if it is a legitimate function of government, it should be as efficient and accurate as possible.
All right. So introvert, come on.
I'm not buying that for a second.
Not a chance. Jason Schultz, once again, thank you so much, Jason, for joining us. And we look forward to hearing you guys and throughout the legislative session on what's going on.
Thank you for the time on air. Happy New Year.
All right. Thanks. And once again, Jason Schultz joining us here this morning on KCIM.